And we're live. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Thomas Kelly. I'm Associate Director of Residence Life here at Worcester State. And this is Hangouts Before You Woo Life. Hangouts Before You Woo Life is an online web show geared towards new residents here at Worcester State University. It's through these shows that we talk about important topics that assist with your transition to residence life as well as Worcester State. Each week we discuss a new topic, we have new guests, sometimes it's just Res Life, sometimes it's guests. Just before we get started, if you want to follow along in the back channel, feel free to tweet us using hashtag WooLife. If we don't get to your questions today, we'll make sure to follow those up in a future episode. So today I'm excited to be joined by Assistant Dean of Student Affairs and Director of Student Accessibility Services, Fran Manacchio. Fran, welcome. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
So tell everyone at home a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So my name is, as TK said, my name is Fran Manacchio, and it's my pleasure to serve as Director of Student Accessibility Services, which is otherwise known as Disability Services Office, and as Assistant Dean of Student Affairs. I started at Worcester State in January of 2011.
Great. So I've got a bunch of questions for you. Hopefully no curveballs, but so what exactly is Student Accessibility Services?
Sure. So Student Accessibility Services is the go-to place for one-stop shopping for any students who have a medical condition, a learning disability, a mental health or emotional issue, a mobility issue, a sensory issue. Sometimes we use the term disability really broadly. So it includes all of those kinds of categories that have an impact on students' life, particularly in academics. We also deal with students who might have what I call a temporary boo-boo, like an athlete who might have a broken wrist, or someone who might have a sprained ankle and is getting around campus on crutches. So we serve students only, and we serve students from incoming first-year students, transfer students, and at any point in their career at Worcester State.
Great. So what is the process in order to determine if a student is eligible for accommodations?
So the process is 3 steps. One is that we require every student who is looking for accommodations of some sort, educational or otherwise, to have a face-to-face intake appointment with us, either myself or Kelly McGill, who's our learning specialist. To scheduling that appointment, we ask for the 2 other items. One is a questionnaire called a confidential profile that asks questions about you, the student, and the challenges that you're facing and what kind of accommodations you may have had in the past. And the third piece is documentation, most frequently a letter from someone called a qualified professional. So for example, if you have a learning disability, and you had an IEP, an individual education plan in high school, your qualified professional letter would be the testing report that you had done as part of that IEP process. If you have a medical condition such as diabetes or Crohn's disease or other medical conditions, then your primary healthcare provider, whether it's a pediatrician or a specialist or a nurse practitioner, would write a letter following our guidelines. So the process for registering with us is to do the confidential profile, have documentation from a qualified professional, and to schedule an intake with us during the summer prior to the start of the academic fall semester. We're starting intakes with incoming first-year students and transfers June 5th.
Great. So what sort of services and support is available here at Worcester State for students?
Okay. So for educational accommodations, the most typical accommodations for students who qualify for accommodations, during that intake process, we establish whether or not a student is eligible for accommodations. So if you're eligible for accommodations, most typically students are looking for an extension of some high school accommodations, which might have included extra time for tests in a separate area from the classroom. That's one of our most frequently used accommodations. Other services and supports that we offer is that we have myself and Kelly and occupational therapy graduate student provide some one-on-one services for students. And we have some additional services and supports through that, academic advising, assistance with course selection, and time management and organizational support, habit building.
Great. So what if a student was already to have an IEP or a 504 plan? How would that apply to them now here at Worcester State?
Sure. So two things to say about that. One is, if you, the student, had an IEP or a 504 plan in high school, please come see us. I really want to encourage those students who have had services and supports to try and resist the temptation to try and do it on your own. To come and see us over the summer. Your IEP or 504 plan do not automatically transfer to college. High school environment and college environment are different environments and different regulations apply. Some of the accommodations from an IEP or a 504 plan might transfer to college, some might not. We do not want you, the student who's had a 504 and IEP, to bring those documents to college and give them to your college professors. They don't need them, they don't want them, and it's too much information.
Okay, great. So a little bit about, for resident students specifically, what sort of housing accommodations are available for these students?
Sure, so we have a housing accommodation process that TK and I are both part of. We have a committee that includes the Director of Counseling, the Director of Health Services, the two of us, and our learning specialist from Student Accessibility Services. Again, there's a process for students to follow. We have limited number of housing options on campus, including single rooms. But students who have either or some significant mental health issues can apply for housing accommodations by completing a student request form. And once again, we need information from a qualified professional to give rationale and justification to the request. Typically, students are requesting singles, but as I noted, we have a limited number of singles. We also would have accommodations on campus for students who have mobility issues or sensory issues, and it's really helpful for all of us to plan that well in advance of students moving in over Labor Day. We want to have everything in place before a student moves into campus.
Absolutely. So what exactly does the review process for housing accommodations look like?
Sure. So there's dates for returning students and incoming first-year students to have their materials in. Once we have those materials in, all of the 6 people involved in the committee review the documentation and the student's request, excuse me, and the qualified professional's information. And depending on the request and the inventory of housing that we have available, decisions will be made. We generally, if a student is eligible for housing accommodations, we do our best to grant them their first request.
Right. And how often are housing accommodations reviewed?
We review housing accommodations generally twice a year, once in the winter for returning students and once in the spring/early summer for incoming first-year students.
Great. So are there any new initiatives or services being offered by Student Accessibility Services this year?
Sure. So we have on 3rd year for hosting and facilitating a local chapter of Delta Alpha Pi, which is the International Honor Society for Students with Disabilities. And our chapter is called Gamma Chi. We currently have 46 members, and 6 of those students have been trained as peer leadership, peer advisory leadership. And they're going to provide some peer support to incoming first-year students, particularly those that are transitioning from high school with an IEP or a 504 plan, to help them adjust to college with some of the self-regulatory skills, time management, organizational support, wellness, sleep, eating, exercise, and the transition from a very structured high school environment to the much more free, self-autonomous environment that college has to offer. So that's a new initiative this year.
Great.
Yeah,
That's
we're
awesome.
really excited about that.
So that's all of our questions. So thank you for coming and hanging out with us. Before we wrap things up, is there anything else that you want to add?
I would just encourage students to not be bashful or shy. We're a very welcoming office located in the administration building, Suite 131, right on the same floor as the registrar, academic success, student accounts. So feel free to stop by and visit us. And let's work together to have you achieve your academic goals.
Awesome. Well,
Okay.
again, Fran, thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back again next week. Next week, we're going to be joined by student accounts. So we'll be talking a little bit about what makes up a student's bill. We're very excited to talk about that. As always, if you missed today's episode or a different episode, you can go to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/WSUResLife. And we have a playlist of all of our Hangouts. You can follow along on social media, so Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, at WSUResLife, or Facebook.com/WooLife. I'm Thomas Kelly, signing off from Worcester State. Again, just want to thank Fran for joining us, and we will be back again next Wednesday. Have a good one.